I see nodding and thumbs up, so I think we are. So David, would you like to let colleagues in?
Yes, doing that shortly.
Hello, everyone. Just to say that there's a slight issue with the link, it seems. So we're just sorting it out and we're just waiting for all the other colleagues to join in. Thank you.
Maybe can we send again the invite with the instruction to the link?
Dear colleagues, just a quick update to say that there's approximately 60 participants currently waiting to join. So we're just going to give them a couple of more minutes because there seems to be still a bit of an issue with the link. So if you do have something to do, please by all means go ahead and do it, and we'll probably aim to restart in about 5 minutes.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. I hope you can hear me. And I just want to start off with a sincere apologies for the link problems that we're having right now. And just to give you an update, that the link has been resent to all the registered participants. So we hope that they'll be joining us in the next while as they slowly trickle in. I would like to warmly welcome you all to the stock take that we're organizing today on advancing reintegration and inclusion through multi-stakeholder pledge on securing housing, land, and property rights. As you're very much aware, I mean, this is one of the multi-stakeholder pledges for the Global Compact on Refugees, and it's an important component as we look at reintegration, return and reintegration, as well as also inclusion for refugees. So today's event aims to take stock on the progress and the shared promising practices, lessons learned, and foster dialogue around securing housing, land, and property rights as a foundation for reintegration and inclusion. We are conducting this stock take also in a recorded format, just so that we can also capture a lot of the experiences that we will be hearing today, as well as also the extensive experience that we hope that will be shared during today's stock take exercise. Just to give you an outline of what we plan to do today. We will be starting off with a welcoming remark by two speakers, which will then be followed by a first group of sessions, which is the overview by the pledge co-conveners, as well as the keynote addresses. And then this session will then be followed by the presentation on progress, where we will be hearing about Burundi, Armenia, as well as other countries where the partners have experience in. And then this will then open up the floor for the intervention from the floor for all participants who are joining us, and then we will hope to conclude in terms of the wrap up today. So without much ado, I would like to give the floor for the welcoming remarks to two of our speakers, starting with Mr. Sajjad Malik, Director of Division of Resilience and Solutions for UNHCR. Over to you.
Thank you, Sakura. And in the interest of time, now that we're trying to catch up, but let me first recognize His Excellency, Mr. Haider Ali Ahmed, our ambassador from the Permanent Mission of Syria, to be on this call. Thank you very much for joining us here today. So, dear colleagues, just a very brief opening, putting the context right. A warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us in this important stock taking. As we know, at the end of 2024, the global refugee population reached 42.7 million people. In the same year, more than 1.6 million returned to their countries. And this is the highest number since 2002. We've been getting a lot of influxes in neighboring countries and beyond and in the regions. But it's the first time that we are now witnessing large number of returnees going back home. These returns took place from 78 countries. So some countries, very small returns, but at least the progress continues. And it is 217 countries of origin. So you would be surprised to see how many countries of origin people are beginning to return back to, in some small numbers and some larger numbers. Only 4 countries constitute 54% of this larger group of refugees. They are from Syria, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. Returns also occurred in other contexts. We look at Nigeria, Burundi, Central African Republic, Cameroon, to name a few. But these journeys home are rarely simple. Many face fragile peace, rudimentary infrastructure, limited basic services, and constrained economic opportunities. The risk of renewed displacement remains real, unless this courage of returnees is matched by sustained, coordinated support. This support must bring together humanitarian, development, and peace actors, while also addressing the root causes of displacement. This also reinforces the urgent need to focus on solutions, particularly through sustainable reintegration in countries of origin, and at the same time continue providing inclusion, self-reliance support to refugees in countries of asylum while they wait to return home. Promoting secure housing, land, and property rights is central. Access to housing, land, and property is foundational to restoring dignity, accessing services, rebuilding livelihoods, and contributing to peace and recovery. We are seeing encouraging commitments from governments such as those in Burundi, South Sudan, Somalia, Colombia, the Central African Republic, Chad, Mali, among many others, where national strategies aligned with development plans, frameworks developed to address solutions of returnees and refugees where they are right now residing. Similarly, UN country teams are advancing integrated framework in places like Syria. Large number of returnees are going back to. And I was looking at the statistics already of this morning. Nearly 628,000 Syrian refugees have crossed back into Syria from the neighboring countries, and about 1.5 million IDPs have returned to their places of homes, bringing the total number of returnees to over 2.1 million people. That's a large number of returnees have gone back home. The multi-stakeholder pledge on advancing reintegration and inclusion through secure housing, land, and property rights reflects the collective momentum we have built towards solutions. It reinforces broader commitments made at the Global Refugee Forum, particularly those related to return and reintegration, and contributes meaningfully to inclusion and self-reliance outcomes. A diverse group of stakeholders joins this effort. Governments, partners, other countries, NGOs, UN agencies have all joined this pledge. Today's event and the upcoming high-level officials meeting at the end of the year provide us with an opportunity to take stock of where we stand, reflect on progress and challenges, and share promising practices. Let us use this space today, about the time we are left with, to listen and learn from each other. Together we can build on the foundations we have laid and ensure that the work ahead is anchored in the principles of inclusion, dignity, and responsibility. Thank you, and back to you, Sakura.
Thank you very much, Sajad, for framing our discussion today. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor to Mr. Markus Meyer, the first Secretary Political Affairs of the German Permanent Mission, who will also be giving us the welcoming remarks. Over to you, Mr. Markus.
Thank you very much, Sakura. Dear colleagues, dear co-leads, it is with great pleasure that I add Germany's voice to today's welcome for the stocktaking event. As was just highlighted, the topic of housing, land, and property is of utmost importance for refugees and other persons of concern to UNHCR. Questions related to housing, land, and property form the bedrock of a daily life in dignity, whether it be when refugees can return to their countries of origin, or whether they strive to rebuild their lives in dignity in countries of asylum. It enables access to education, to work, to healthcare, and safety. The efforts surrounding housing, land, and property speak directly to Objective 4 of the Global Compact on Refugees, which aims to support conditions in countries of origin for return in safety and dignity. And while international refugee protection and assistance faces many challenges, there is consensus among host countries, countries of origins, and donors alike. More needs to be done on durable solutions, including on voluntary, safe, and dignified returns. As we move towards the high-level officials meeting in December, where we will take stock of the progress made since the last Global Refugee Forum, it is important that we reinforce these efforts, in particular also on the multi-stakeholder pledge on housing, land, and property. We need to deliver on the commitments made, and we need more actors to play their parts. And today is an important event towards December. Ladies and gentlemen, Germany will continue to play its own role as one of UNHCR's biggest donors, but also as one of the biggest host countries in the world, including through the inclusion of refugees. Among others, Germany has accommodated more than 1.2 million refugees from Ukraine. Public accommodation for refugees is scarce and costly, and living conditions can be of lower quality. At the same time, the private and the civic sector showed high levels of solidarity. Allow me to give you an example for that. In response to the crisis in Ukraine and the sudden need for accommodation, the federal government in Germany supported the pilot digital platform called Walls That Help as a matching platform for temporary private housing providers to refugees. On this platform, refugees can independently search for suitable accommodation according to their needs. A humanitarian organization offers psychological support to both homeowners and refugees in this process. The platform and all data, as well as the well-being of the participants, is monitored so as to prevent fraud and any potential harm. The provision of the support structure and a marketing campaign brought new volunteers into action. That is, almost 60% of housing providers have not been involved in refugee-related volunteering before, and more than 80% report positive experiences. So far, more than 7,600 users have been engaged in rentals in more than 1,100 cities in Germany in 23-24, after matching already 27,000 refugees during a voluntary housing campaign in 2022. And the platform now also aims to evolve into support for all refugees. The project in itself has been a collaboration between state actors, private actors, such as the company Wunderflats, non-governmental actors such as the NGO Project Together, which is also co-financed by the German Federal Foreign Office for Migration and Refugees and the EU. And I believe that's quite a good illustration for the multi-stakeholder and whole of society approach that underpins, of course, this pledge, but our collective efforts in the context of the GRF more broadly. It is our view that such a collaboration is very much needed and useful addition to the state's responsibility for refugee housing. It helps integration, as shared living fosters also mutual understanding and may provide for local networks that are useful for the job search. It is also a great resource for local administrations who can rely on digital matching instead of a manual mechanism. This just to provide some examples from our experiences. But let me also reiterate this, our government's support for the Pledge on Housing, Land and Property, which is aimed at enhancing sustainable reintegration, as well as inclusion and self-reliance in countries of asylum for refugees. As we're about to take stock today and learn more from our colleagues from UN Habitat, the Norwegian Refugee Council, ZOA, the World Bank, but also Syria, Burundi, and Armenia, I wish you insightful conversations and impulses for our reinforced collective efforts on this important topic, including through sharing lessons and best practices. And I hope maybe our example is a good starting point for all the rich experiences that surely will come in the coming hours. And it is also a moment that should be seen as a preparatory step towards the HLOM in December, which together again will mark an important opportunity for us to reinforce these efforts, to formally take stock and to mobilize the political support that we need to make this a reality. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meyer, for a very comprehensive actually welcome report, welcome remarks, but also really highlighting the important examples that is already taking place as a very whole of society approach, as you have mentioned. So thank you very much for a very informative welcome remarks. And with that, I would like to go to the overview of the pledges by the co-conveners, which will also be complemented by the keynote speech. First, we will now hear a brief update on the progress and vision for the HLP pledge. And we will be having two speakers, the co-conveners of the pledge, as you have heard. The first speaker will be Ms. Cecilia Rosselli, Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Norwegian Refugee Council, and she will be followed by Ms. Regina Orvaninos, Program Management Officer for the UN Habitat. So with that, I will give the floor to Ms. Rosselli for the update from the update of the pledges. Over to you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Sakura, and thank you very much to UNHCR colleagues for convening this important and timely event. We are particularly grateful to member states other UN agencies such as UN Habitat, with whom we collaborate very closely also in leading the HLP area of responsibility currently under the Global Protection Cluster, other civil society organizations and all the stakeholders who have submitted the pledges so far. The commitment of all of us form the foundation for this collective effort. And I want to emphasize the word collective because this is what will potentially be making us succeeding going forward. I'd like to provide a very quick reminder of why we need a multi-stakeholder pledge on solutions and HLP by saying that HLP rights are fundamentally intertwined with the experience of forced displacement. We heard already from Sajad about the details of the importance of HLP rights. Refugees and other displaced populations face systematic violations of these rights from the moment they move to their efforts to find durable solutions wherever they are. As a community, we know that without ensuring HLP rights, solutions to displacement are not possible and we really remain out of reach. International law and policy, including the Global Compact on Refugees, clearly support the promotion of HLP rights. So we have the legal framework. However, in 2019 at the Global Refugee Forum, we saw very few pledges directly addressing these issues. And that's why together with UNHCR and UN Habitat, the Norwegian Refugee Council worked hard all together in 2023 to mobilize a multi-stakeholder pledge to fill that gap and also spark this collective action. What do we want to achieve with this pledge? The goal is very simple, but significant. We want to increase the number of displaced women, children, and men with secure access to housing, land, and property rights. And this is essential for enabling refugees to achieve durable solutions, as we said. The pledge currently includes five core commitments that are tailored to a different range of actors. The first one is restitution of HLP rights for countries of origin. The second is recognition of tenure rights for host and origin countries. The third, comprehensive strategies to integrate HLP in housing and land programming for all the actors that are involved. The fourth is material support to be provided by donors, financial institutions, and other actors. I'm very glad to hear about the example of collaboration with private sector that our colleague from the German mission brought up. And fifth, the core commitments that is included in the pledge is technical support from UN bodies, civil societies, and NGOs like NRC. How have we made progress? I will be very quick on this because it takes time to progress on this front. So there is not a lot to build on, but I'm very glad to hear some examples have already been put forward. Implementation is underway. And there is still momentum, which we really have to focus on from now till the end of the year when we will meet again. There are at the moment 6 member states, including Germany, Armenia, and Burundi, that are represented here today, that have submitted HLP-specific pledges. Some have already honored this pledge. 15 others have integrated HLP into broader pledges, which is also something very good. We have a number of civil society organizations and UN agencies that have pledged for HLP either directly or in other pledges, which is also good because we need to integrate HLP issues in the broader sector. So we've got visibility, which is already something. We now really need action. NRC own pledge focus on technical support, as I said, and we are advancing HLP rights through direct assistance. We have already provided information and legal support services to persons affected by displacement to more than 700,000 people, including refugees, returnees, but also IDPs. We have provided capacity building through HLP trainings, specifically to individuals and also to local actors. And we have engaged at policy level in various different forms. And I want to also emphasize the role and the work that we are doing to strengthen coordination mechanisms around HLP. We are particularly grateful for the support from countries like Germany that through GIZ and KFW are funding projects to support HLP rights of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq, but also displaced people in Libya. I'm just mentioning few examples, and I specifically chose these two because they are extremely relevant and interesting to show what is possible when we are able to engage actively with development donors and actors. Something that as a sector we are not very good at doing, and definitely not very good at doing together. I would like to close with a call to action and leave you with 3 key messages. The first one, we need to build and sustain coalitions that like this one. This pledge show a strong interest across the sector. We need to build on this and really concretize pledges and plans. NRC is ready to continue supporting with technical expertise and also beyond. We urge UNHCR, UN Habitat, and also other UN agencies and member states to help us convening, because you have a strong convening power that is needed to reach beyond the comfort zone. We need to mobilize new actors, as mentioned above, and we need to continue promoting this coalition in the framework of a changing environment that is unfolding in front of us with the humanitarian reset and the UN at 80. Second, we need to prioritize restitution and compensation. Let's be candid, political will on restitution and compensation remains limited, and we really need the GRF as a platform to foster meaningful dialogue, to mobilize and action policy recommendations. And third and final, we need to ensure adequate funding. As we all know, we are experiencing an extraordinary funding crunch, and prospects for the future, especially for the humanitarian sector, where we had to hyper prioritize in the recent months, are really sober. The revised GHO that was launched a couple of weeks ago clearly indicates we are leaving behind almost 2 million people out of the humanitarian books, meaning they will not have food, they will not have access to basic services, needless to say, very limited, if any, access to HLP rights. We must ensure that HLP rights are built into humanitarian and development programming and across the displacement cycle, including in climate adaptation strategies, something that sometimes we forget. We need to reach out to development actors more proactively. I said that already, and I'm glad to repeat it because we really have to do it together. The GRF and the partnership we have created around this pledge is a unique opportunity, but we have to build on existing examples like the one presented by the German mission, and we have to think with more creativity. The time for business as usual is unfortunately ending, and we have to prove that we are ready for this. Are we ready for this in this virtual room? I leave you with this question, and I really would like to hear from others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, and thank you for also reminding us of why it was so important to have this multi-stakeholder pledge, why this rights is still very much important, as well as also reminding us and also encouraging us with your call to action. I would like to hand the floor over to Ms. Regina Orbanianos. My apologies if I got the pronunciation wrong. She's the UN Habitat Program Management Officer, who will also take us on the stock take of what has been achieved so far. Over to you.
Many thanks. Thank you. I would like to first acknowledge to UNHCR. Thank you for inviting us to this stock taking event. So my name is Regina Arbañanos. I'm the Human Settlement Officer from UN Habitat in the Land, Housing and Shelter section. Is my screen screening correctly, correct? Okay, so, well, on behalf of UN Habitat, we're grateful for the opportunity to participate and to learn from different practices shared today. And we appreciate the engagement from all stakeholders in this discussion. So reflecting on the progress since the Global Refugee Forum in 2023, we have witnessed a continuous call on advancing security, increased secure housing, land and property rights as part of a cornerstone of reintegration and inclusion. The 2023 multi-stakeholder pledge catalyzed the collaboration, innovation, and action across sectors. However, we also recognize the ongoing legal, institutional, and operational challenges that continue to hinder the access to secure tenure for displaced populations. From UN Habitat as coordinators of the Housing, Land and Property Area of Responsibility, and in partnership with the Norwegian Refugee Council, UN Habitat remains fully committed to advancing the HLP rights as a key component of durable solutions for the displaced populations. As you all know, our work is grounded on a rights-based, inclusive, and collaborative approach that combines global coordination, technical support, and capacity building and advocacy. So as part of the 2023 pledge, UN Habitat committed to raise awareness about the importance of addressing land-related root causes of conflict and protecting HLP rights as essential to achieve durable solutions and sustainable peace. Building capacity across UN Habitat, the global network to identify and address HLP issues. We committed to support countries in protecting displaced people's HLP rights and facilitating the restitution of housing, land, and property, especially women and children, and to mobilize both financial and human resources to scale the impact of the HLP strategies. The results since 2023, we have supported HLP responses in 19 humanitarian operations, working closely with colleagues from the protection, shelter, camp coordination, and camp management clusters. Together, we promoted a more integrated and complementary approach to HLP programming, helping bridge humanitarian development and peace-building efforts. We worked a lot as well in addressing policy and technical gaps in linking HLP interventions with the durable solutions and the nexus approach nexus approaches to ensure long-term impacts. More concretely on our operational work, UN Habitat worked to protect HLP rights for displaced people, but mostly by promoting good land governance and implementing targeted interventions that supported legal and policy reforms on particularly on linked to land reforms. We focus particularly on securing HLP rights for vulnerable groups, including displaced people, through collaboration with governments, civil society, and international partners. We strengthened the land administration systems and advocated for gender-sensitive approaches. These efforts help displaced populations reclaim their property and achieve sustainable reintegration. So specifically in couple of countries I want to go through as some examples. In Iraq, we supported internally displaced persons and returnees in Sanjar by issuing occupancy certificates and minority communities and providing them with legal assistance and rehabilitating housing for displaced Yazidis. Through the current project, Modernizing Urban Land Knowledge, we are helping the government digitalizing land records across multiple governorates to improve tenure security. In Lebanon, following the Beirut port explosion, we rehabilitated damaged homes and established legal protections for tenants in heritage buildings. In Syria, we restored cadastral services in Aleppo and Al-Qusayr and digitalized property records to help displaced individuals reclaim the lost documentation. In Sudan, as a different approach, we focus on participatory land mapping and conflict-sensitive dispute resolution mechanisms to support the returnee populations in Darfur. And finally, as one of the final country examples, in Yemen, we are currently providing legal counseling and mediation services to protect HLP rights of displaced people, particularly women and vulnerable groups. So these country-specific interventions demonstrate our comprehensive approach that combines legal reforms, digital land tools, gender-responsive policies with post-conflict recovery. In terms of advocacy and knowledge generation, we advanced the knowledge sharing, enhanced knowledge sharings by expanding the HLP knowledge base. We co-organize training, exchange events, and durable solutions on durable solutions, conflict, displacement, and tenure rights. We took these advocacy efforts in major international platforms such as the World Urban Forum, the UNCCD COP in Riyadh, the Humanitarian Networks and Partnership Week, and the Third Arab Land Conference in Rabat. We supported through knowledge generation through publications such as policy directions on housing, land, and property solutions to prevent displacement, on customary tenure through the durable housing, land, and property solution for customary displacement context. And together with FAO, IOM, the Office of Human Rights, and the Norwegian Refugee Council, we also contributed to the publication on displaced persons implementing the Pinheiro principles in the Middle East and North Africa. Looking ahead to the high-level officials meeting later this year, we acknowledge that as the humanitarian landscape evolves, we are actively engaging in the ongoing humanitarian reset process, and UN Habitat reaffirms its commitment to protecting and promoting HLP rights through effective, adaptable, and grounded coordination models. We look ahead to the HLOM, and we will continue champion secure tenure as a foundation for reintegration, inclusion, and resilience, and as a critical element for peace and development. We support the implementation of multi-stakeholder pledge through the coordinated global action, are ready to provide technical expertise to partners at all different levels, and strengthen the knowledge and capacity through active engagement in global forum. We look forward to drive advocacy efforts at the center on HLP rights for displaced populations, and particularly for women, and remain that the HLP remains central to the new coordination configuration and the humanitarian reset. Finally, we encourage all stakeholders to continue sharing progress and use the pledge to support fundraising efforts. From UN Habitat, we join the call to ensure that by December we arrive to the Global Refugee Forum next year with stronger partnerships, clear evidence of impact, and a shared vision for lasting solutions that are rooted with secure housing, land, and property rights. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Regina, for a very comprehensive presentation and also some of the operational aspects of the HLP that is already ongoing. That's very much greatly appreciated. So we've now heard from the two co-conveners on what has been happening, also a bit of the past in terms of the origins of the pledges, as well as also the progress and visions of where we want to go. We'd now like to take the opportunity to listen from our key stakeholders or key who basically will also give us their perspective on what is really critical for the HLP pledges and the multi-stakeholder pledge as we move on to the HLOM. So with this small introduction, I would like to hand the floor over to His Excellency Ambassador Haider Ali Ahmed, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of the Syrian Arab Republic. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you for all the efforts for organizing this meeting. Dear distinguished colleagues, at the outset, I would like to acknowledge and commend the tireless efforts of Mr. Filippo Grandi, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in advancing protection and durable solution for refugees around the world, including my own country, Syria. We particularly thanking him for choosing to visit the Syrian Arab Republic on World Refugee Day, and for meeting with Syrian families who have returned to their homes across several governorates. His visit conveyed a strong message, reaffirming the importance of supporting the Syrian government's efforts to create the necessary conditions for the dignified, voluntary, and sustainable return of all refugees and IDPs. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the distinguished speakers who preceded me for their comprehensive presentation, and I thank Mr. Sajid Malik for his warm welcomes, and to commend all conveners, partners, and representatives from UNHCR, UN Habitat, NRC, and member states for their valuable contribution to this discussion. Their insight will provide important context for the challenges and progress we collectively seek to address. Distinguished colleague, the significant political development witnessed in Syria over recent months have revived hopes for the returns of the Syrian refugees to their homelands after more than a decade in displacement. Since 8 December 2024, voluntary returns of a considerable number of Syrian refugees from neighboring countries have already begun. Despite the deeply national and humanitarian dimension of return, many returnees continue to face considerable challenges. Chief among them, access to adequate housing, The practices of the former regime have resulted in the looting, destruction, or severe damage of homes and infrastructure, with an estimated 25% of housing across Syria rendered uninhabitable. Moreover, many returnees have lost legal ownership documents. In certain areas, property records were destroyed or not updated, and the former regime reclassified some properties as state-owned. Despite these challenges, the Syrian government continued to take practical steps to address obstacles related to housing, land, and the property, and to correct past violations, and to restore right to their lawful owners, thereby fostering an environment conducive to dignified return. The steps include ensuring the legal protection of property rights, taking measures to reinstate the validity of legal documents, and addressing cases of forced ownership, transfers, and property acquisition under coercion or threats. As an example, in February 2025, the General Directorate of Cadastral Affairs issued a directive suspending all real estate transitions, including sales, donations, and exchange, in order to prevent any unlawful manipulation or seizures of citizens' property. Furthermore, in May this year, the President of the Syrian Arab Republic issued a decree annulling precautionary seizures decisions imposed on a number of Syrian citizens between 2012 and 2024. This measure aims to deliver justice to individuals who had been deprived of their rights and properties as a result of arbitrary decisions issued by institutions of the former regime, in the absence of legal or judicial grounds. In parallel, the Syrian government has engaged in cooperation with international organizations across several initiatives focused on housing, land, and property rights. This includes damage and needs assessment at the municipal level, the new urban plan developed jointly by the Ministry of Local Administration and Environment and the United Nations Human Settlement Program, UN Habitat, as we just listened from our dear colleague. The cooperation framework between the Ministry of Justice and UNHCR to enhance legal protection for returning refugees and internally displaced persons, the rehabilitation of the Directorate of Cadastral Affairs, as well as the participation of Syrian institutions in training programs organized by United Nations agencies. Distinguished colleague, the Syrian Arab Republic attached great value to the vital role played by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in coordinating and facilitating the voluntary, safe, and dignified return of refugees. We look forward to expanding this cooperation to help ensure the sustainability of return. In this context, Syria emphasizes the importance of adopting an integrated approach that combines early recovery with reconstruction, one that supports the government's efforts to improve humanitarian and living conditions, enhance basic services, rehabilitate damaged infrastructure, and assist in the repair of homes that have been partially or completely destroyed. Syria also welcomed the positive steps taken by the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Japan, and Switzerland to lift the economic sanctions imposed on Syria, and considers this to be constructive measures that contribute to the country's recovery, stabilization, and reconstruction process. In conclusion, the Syrian Arab Republic values the contribution of donors countries, despite the prevailing global economic challenges, and reaffirm its firm commitment to strengthening cooperation with the United Nations and its member states. This partnership is essential to improving the humanitarian and living conditions of the Syrian people and to supporting the government's efforts to guarantee the voluntary and sustainable return of Syrian refugees and internally displaced persons, and to enable them to rebuild their lives in safety and dignity in their homeland. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you very much for laying out the immense and significant challenges that Syria is facing in ensuring the dignified return and reintegration of the Syrian refugees, as well as also those who have been internally displaced. I think the challenges are immense, but already the opportunities that are emerging with the government leadership on how this can be addressed in terms of the housing, land and property is extremely warming, despite the challenges that we're hearing. So thank you very much for also setting the tone of this very important dialogue. With that, I would like to pass the floor on to Ms. Soraya Goga, the lead urban specialist, urban resilience and land Global Department of the World Bank Group. So with that, over to you, Soraya.
Thanks so much, Sakura, and thank you so much for the introduction. I'm not sure if everyone can see my screen just yet. Can you confirm, Sakura? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'll introduce myself a little bit more. As Sakura introduced me, I'm a lead urban specialist at the World Bank. I am actually a very operational person. I work in our operational units. And, you know, as Cecilia said, we're currently in a different phase. You know, it is not time for business as usual. Is what she said. And here at the World Bank, in our global practice, we've actually started thinking a little bit more about exactly what this means. In 2020, we did a little bit of a report. It was a white paper on how the World Bank can look at issues of forced displacement in cities and towns. You know, within that, we actually came up with a typology of what it means for the forcibly displaced, whether it's returnees, IDPs, or refugees, to come to cities and towns, right? We identified localized impacts. And, you know, if you know Istanbul, particular neighborhoods of Istanbul were very impacted by refugees. We identified really widespread impacts on urban areas, you know, for example, in Goma, Maiduguri and areas of that. The part that we also identified is that there are camps and settlements which are very close to cities and towns, and that's a type 3, an interdependent relationship. Then there was a type 4, which was the urbanizing camp, and this is your Dadaab, your Kakumas, and areas like that. And then finally, it's your reconstruction. Now, within that, in our global practice, we've really been focusing on your type 1, type 2, and type 3. And our assumption on type 4 is that this is what, you know, this is what the humanitarian agencies look at. And of course, over the last few years, this has actually changed completely. Many of you would have known that we're now actually starting to work in camp areas as well, particularly in Kenya and in Ethiopia as well. So that has really pushed us to actually challenge some of the assumptions that we have made. You know, start asking ourselves, well, what exactly needs to change? The questions that we had identified before, you know, the fact that we needed a different approach to urban areas, you know, the fact that the interventions we needed were across 5 dimensions has actually now led to other questions. You know, particularly now, we ask ourselves, can camps be sustainable over time? Which camps can be sustainable? Is it only the interdependent ones, which are the type 4? The type 3. What about the type 4? What will happen to people here? We also are increasingly starting to ask ourselves if this particular approach would work for returnees as well. Great. Within this, I skipped one. When we were looking at the issues of urban forced displacement, you know, we really identified the challenges in urban areas, which were very different from those of rural areas. And that's, you know, the interconnectedness of urban areas, the network, the fact that the physical footprint has a spatial impact that actually is set in time. What we didn't look at and what we're increasingly starting to look at is the location of settlements in more rural areas, particularly in the context where people have additional freedom of movement, and ask ourselves, well, will a declining regional or regional economic development approach work more for these particular areas? And that is not an answer we have just yet, but it is certainly a question that we're starting to ask ourselves. When we did the work on urban forced displacement, we actually focused very specifically on a people in place approach. What we said is that we should address people in the places where they're at, even in urban areas. Within that, we should also address the needs of the geographical area. And in urban areas, this was also almost always linked to network infrastructure. Our assumptions at the time was that within camps, which often are more rurally based, this again would be taken care a little bit of humanitarian agencies, and that there would always be money in the system to actually invest in these particular areas. Now, in the current funding climate, I think this particular assumption is being challenged. And the question we ask ourselves is, should we really be investing in these particular places, and how should we be investing in these particular places at all? Finally, within the urban forced displacement approach, we identified 5 dimensions, or 5 dimensions or challenges within which we would have to invest. That was the spatial, the infrastructure and services and land dimensions, the institutional dimension, the economic dimension, and the social and security dimension. More recently, we've actually started looking at the issue of the camps to settlements transition, and many of these dimensions continue to come up. All right, so let me turn a little bit from this more general aspect of how the bank is looking at the urban forced displacement or the human settlements agenda to what we do when we look at housing. In general, the bank does not really look at housing from a from a rights-based approach. We actually look at it from a very market-based approach. This, in a sense, puts us a little bit at odds for those of us who work in fragile and conflict-affected areas, such as in Somalia and Sudan, as well as South Sudan. However, within the value chain, what we look at is opportunities for housing rather than the actual house itself. Our interventions start at the very bottom of the value chain, where we actually start to look at access to land. Our second aspect that we look at is city planning and building regulations, then the infrastructure and services. We like to look at the development and building materials, sort of the whole construction sector. Moving up the value chain then is looking at the actual building itself, right? The actual house construction, how does that happen? The developer finance and the end user finance. And to be honest, when I was asked to present here, I looked at this and I thought to myself, oh, it's not at all relevant to this particular agenda. But as I started looking at it, I actually realized that particularly in the work that we're doing with NRC and others in Somalia and in South Sudan, we actually do a lot of this, right? And I know UN Habitat as well also does look at a lot of this. The city planning and regulatory frameworks. That's something we look at as urban planners, geographers, as UN Habitat, and as the World Bank. We work with local governments to try and look at this. On the infrastructure and services, both the humanitarian agencies as well as the World Bank, when we are actually looking and looking at providing services, this is really what we look at. Without knowing it, we actually are providing if not the house itself, but we are actually providing access to housing itself, housing opportunities, sorry. With the development and building materials, to be honest, I think we could be doing a lot more of this. I do think that this is a place where our small scale microfinance, the microfinance can also help. On this particular one, especially in FCV circumstances, I believe that from the development perspective, we actually have a lot to learn from the humanitarian agencies itself. On the developer finance and the end user finance, in most of the FCV situations that we work in, the regulations are just not in place for that, for the large financing. Moving on, I just want to talk a little bit about the World Bank's actual housing projects. To be honest, with the World Bank, we did a portfolio review, and there are very few instances where we actually do housing itself. What we have done is informal settlements upgrading. What we have done is, for example, access to service delivery, but we have very rarely provided the house itself. There are many reasons for that, but I just want to go through some of the projects that we have looked at, which have been quite successful. We have provided houses in actually a very long time ago in Eastern Europe, including in Azerbaijan. In Sri Lanka, we have also done housing, and in Georgia. For many years, we did not do housing, and for reasons I'll come to again. More recently, though, we've actually picked up our housing agenda in both Ukraine and Armenia. And I will say that in Ukraine and Armenia, we're able to engage because the land issues, as well as the environment, the enabling environment is in there. In Somalia, we've partnered with both UNOPS, IOM, as well as NRC to provide the housing structure itself, but that was on an emergency basis. The reason why the bank has not been engaging as much in actual housing is because when you have protracted conflict, the land issues are really not at a place where we can actually construct housing because of our safeguards concerns. So I just want to talk about the next steps on this particular agenda from the World Bank's perspective. Many of you would know that the World Bank and UNHCR is partnering with on a sustainable responses agenda on how to operate in the current new environment. Within that, our global practice is contributing to 4 particular pieces of information. The first one is going to be looking at patterns of migration. If, for example, there is less funding going to current camps, particularly in the Africa region, if people are given more freedom of movement, where will they actually go? Will people return? And we are seeing instances where there are increasing returns. However, especially for new refugees coming into a country, will they be going to urban areas? What would this look like? Would they be going to capital cities, or will they start acting more like economic migrants, going to a secondary city first and then to a capital city? Second, how exactly should we support cities and towns that are hosting? What are the incentives that we can give to cities and towns to host people coming in? For example, should we be working with them to give them an additional intergovernmental fiscal transfer to actually take new refugees, to take new returnees? What exactly do we have to do to cities and towns and their governments to host? Our next question is where to invest and where not to invest. Definitely, from a sustainable settlements perspective, people will return. Some people will stay in camps because they have nowhere else to go. Within those particular areas, what should we invest in? Lumpy infrastructure is probably not the way to go. Investing in education, absolutely. Investing in humanitarian services, absolutely. Then finally, the question of does this framework work for returnees is also something that we will be looking at in the future. So that's just in a nutshell a little bit of how we have looked at this particular agenda in the past and what additional work we will be doing in the future. So I hope this helps perhaps set a little bit of the context going forward, especially as we move towards December. And we hope by December to have some of the very basic think pieces that I've listed here in the next steps. So thank you so much, and back to you, Sakura.
Soraya, thank you very much for actually a lot of conceptually loaded questions, I should say, and also future looking as we look towards how can all of these dots that we have or seeds, I should say, that we have planted, how can all of these connect together to make sure that we have a sustainable environment, for whether it is for reintegration and return or for solutions in the countries of asylum or even for IDP solutions for those who have been displaced in country. So I think it's a lot of things to chew on, and we very much look forward. I think the entire colleagues who are online right now look forward to connecting, trying to help you and help ourselves connect the dots as we move forward towards December. So thank you very much to all the speakers so far. I know we are slowly running late in our agenda, but we have actually some very, very interesting presentation upcoming, for which we have 4 speakers, or actually I should say 3 speakers, 3 case studies that we would like to really showcase in terms of the presentation on progress. We would be, so as I briefly mentioned, we'll be having 3 presentations, and I would like to start off the first presentation from Burundi, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Jean Bosco Ndinduruvugo. I am so sorry, I've been practicing this, but it didn't quite work, who is the first counselor of the Permanent Mission of Burundi. And with that, sir, you have the floor.
Thanks, moderator. At the second Global Refugee Forum held in Geneva, December 2023, the government of Burundi made a commitment on reintegration and land
Mr. Jean Bosco.
entitled
Mr. Jean Bosco?
Solutions for Burundian Returns through. Sorry. May I restart?
Yes, please. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. At the second Global Refugee Forum held in Geneva in December 2023, the government of Burundi made a commitment on reintegration and land governance entitled Durable Solutions for Burundian Returns through Secure Housing, Land, and Property Rights. Faced with a high number of voluntary repatriations, more than 1,030 Burundian refugees repatriated since 2017, including more than 40,100 in 2020 alone. Burundi has put in place structured mechanisms to address this, including the creation in 2021 of a multi-sectoral coordination platform involving the government, UNHCR, IOM, and UNDP, with the launch of the Joint Return and Reintegration Plan. Throughout the country, municipal land services have been installed and equipped. The government has adopted a system of digitizing land registers to facilitate the registration and granting a municipal land certificates. Land certificates issued by the municipal land services have contributed to land tenure security, as registered land ownership provides security due to the fact that the registration process is assisted by neighbors sharing the land boundary, as well as the essential presence of administrators as a guarantee. Here, registration monitoring committees are also established, and registration reports are duly signed by the HERE committee and the Hill chief and filed. Since the start at the installation of the municipal land services in 2021, land holdings totaling 2,500 kilometers square have been registered, representing 400,000 land certificates issued. This operation is carrying out through the aspects: the individual recognition operation, consisting on an individual application; the group recognition operation, consisting in the systematic registration and certification of land holdings on the Hill. There are two land registration systems in Burundi. First, registration by the land title services and registration by the municipal land services, and both documents have the same legal title to land ownership. The communal land certificates has contributed significantly not only to land security, but also to community resilience, particularly for returns who gain experience in implementing small income generating activities. The CFC provides access to financial institutions to obtain credit for economic resilience activities. More than 1,700 microfinance accounts have been opened as part of economic strengthening, and 2,029 farmers have received financing. Financial empowerment projects for refugees through the Podesi and Merankabandi projects funded by the World Bank aim to support returns and foster social cohesion with the host community. The government has also placed particular emphasis on indigenous peoples through the free allocation of Arab land. Returnees are settled on their respective properties, except for isolated cases of returns without land or reference, whose management is part of the local solidarity policy. An initial return package is provided to returns, financial assistance, $200 per repatriate, household kits, and food for 3 months. As part of their inclusion in national programs, the government is also working to integrate returns into national development programs, making them eligible for the same services and opportunities as the rest of the population. Child protection for Burundian returnees is one of the government's major priorities, and remarkable efforts are being made, such as free schooling. Mechanisms have been put in place to provide returns with access to health care, including free access to pregnant women and children under 5. Strengthening host communities as reintegration initiatives are not limited to returns, but also include support for host communities to minimize potential tensions and promote good social cohesion. Challenge and outlook. Despite the efforts made, challenges persist, including the need to strengthen coordination mechanisms, further mobilize financial resources, and combat poverty and unemployment. To conclude, Burundi has made notable progress, organized management of repatriations, establishment of coordination frameworks, multi-sectoral intervention, and innovative projects. The sustainable reintegration of returns in national issue, pivotal to stability and development, a priority commitment of the government. Burundi has loyal partners who support land security, including UNHCR, IOM, and others to whom we express our gratitude. However, donor funding still needs to be mobilized to ensure the foundation and sustainability of the various projects initiated, as well as their full ownership by the government. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation on the current situation in Burundi and the challenges that are being faced by the returnees who go back to Burundi. I think we were very much heartened by the government's mechanism of the two types of land right opportunities that people have access to, both the state and the municipal, which is of equal value. And I think these are the kind of things that really provide support to make things accessible, to make these important rights accessible to those who have returned. So thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation and a good practice that is occurring in Burundi for the social cohesion of the country. I'm going to give the next presentation to ZOA colleagues, who will also be talking about Burundi as well as other country operations that they have been providing support to. So I'm handing the floor over to Alexandra Tsam, Miss Alexandra Tsam, Land Rights Specialist for ZOA, who's also going to be presenting together with Miss Clara Galea, Institutional Relations Manager for ZOA. So over to you.
Thank you. Should I share my presentation then? Yes, huh? I think so. Okay, I'm coming. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Great. So thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. We are very happy to have the opportunity to present our work today on securing land rights for returnees, refugees, and host communities in Burundi and Uganda. So my name is Clara Galea. I'm the Institutional Relations Manager for ZOA, and I'll be presenting with my colleague Alexandra Tlam, which is our land rights specialist. So I will give a short introduction on ZOA and on our pledge, and then I will let Alexandra continue with the details of our work. So ZOA is a Dutch INGO created in 1974. We are certified by CHS. We have around 1,000 employees, both in the Netherlands, but also in 11 countries where we work, including Burundi and Uganda. You can see some of the countries on the map there. Our mandate is really to provide relief to people affected by conflicts and natural disasters, but also assist them during the recovery process from the crisis. Our program strategy, I'll say a few words about it. So we work in 5 specific sectors, so food security and livelihoods, peace building, which includes our work on land rights, WASH, education and shelter, and we have strategic priorities, which are localization, the peace nexus, of course, climate resilience, and we mainstream gender diversity and inclusion in all of our projects. So now a little bit more about our pledge. So in December 2023, ZOA participated in the Global Refugee Forum in Geneva, and our CEO, Chris Lukian, joined a panel of other key leaders to discuss land rights. In addition to joining this panel, ZOA submitted a pledge for our technical skills. So the pledge was ZOA supports Burundi and Uganda in securing land rights for displaced individuals through expertise in land registration. So more specifically, we pledged to utilize our experience and technical expertise to address land conflicts, to improve land administration and access to land for the most vulnerable, including advocating for the land rights of returning refugees, formalizing land tenancy agreements between refugees and host communities, and translate it into tangible, measurable results. So our approach really integrates land tenure registration, peace building, and agricultural development, with a specific focus on promoting the rights and opportunities for persons with specific needs or vulnerabilities. And as ZOA, we firmly believe that with the necessarily financial support, we can substantially enhance our contribution to securing access to land, leading to tangible and measurable improvements in the lives of the returnees, the refugees, and the host communities. So that being said, I will let Alexandra continue on our work first in Burundi and then in Uganda.
Thank you very much, Clara. And I will give you an update on the actual intervention strategies that we apply both in Burundi and Uganda, and the progress we have made and the impact to date, and closing with some challenges, lessons learned, and recommendations for the future. So first on the Burundian context, in particular, we work in the Makamba province in the south of the country, in Nyanza-Lac district, which has received a considerable number of returning refugees, leading to complex land conflicts related to this repatriation. So we have an intervention which is part of the larger Land at Scale program funded by the Dutch government. And ZOA, together with other partners such as VNG International and our local partner MIPAREC, is applying an integrated approach for systematic land tenure registration. We heard the previous speaker talk that there's two types of land registration in Burundi as well, individual and systematic. And we are supporting the systematic land tenure registration with a special focus on the returning refugees in Nyanza-Lac. We do this through awareness raising the communities, capacity strengthening of the municipal land registration offices, but also of the local conflict mediation structures. And through all this, we are also promoting women's land rights and women's access to land. On top of that, on a more higher level, we are working together with VNG International to develop a model for the sustainable functioning of those municipal land registration offices, sustainable in technical sense, but also financially and institutionally. And we are integrating this, as Clara already said, also with agricultural development. So improving also the land use management. Some key achievements and impact to date from this strategy. So we see that there is an improved land tenure security for both residents or host communities, if you would like, and returnees. We have covered 24 out of the 26 villages of Nyanza-Lac district with land registration. And currently, all this information is being processed by the Municipal Land Registration Office. And to date, almost 11,000 certificates have been issued so far. There's been a reduction of land conflicts, with over 3,000 conflicts having been solved during the intervention so far by local conflict mediation structures. We see an enhanced protection also of women's land rights, with 70% of land certificates being issued in the names of both the husband and the wife together on the certificate. Also the awareness raising that I didn't mention yet, which is happening outside of Nyanza-Lac in transit centers where returnees are being transferred through in Mabanda district and in Ruyigi. So we have reached over 7,200 returnees through those activities of awareness raising, where we share information on the procedures of land registration and the process of land certification to them. Then we move on to another context, Uganda, where we have a main focus in West Nile region, which is a refugee hosting context where many South Sudanese refugees are being hosted. There our intervention focuses specifically on supporting the district land boards to do CCO registration. CCO stands for Certificate of Customary Ownership. So this is focusing on host community land. But Together with that, we have introduced a land tenancy agreement in collaboration with GIZ, which facilitates the use of land by refugees of host community landowners, and to make this process be registered in a more formal way, protecting both the rights and the use of the land for host communities and refugees. We do capacity strengthening in West Nile region, Terego district especially, but also we were able to add 16 other districts where we do capacity strengthening across Uganda, capacity strengthening of the district land boards and the area land committees who are executing the CCO registration. We integrate this with a strengthening of local land conflict mediation committees, or alternative dispute resolution, as it is called in other forums, where we integrate also traditional leaders who are part of these committees. We focus on specific groups with specific needs, in particular women and persons with a disability in Uganda. And we have an integrated approach as well, where we were able to add another intervention area in Lamo, near the Palabek refugee settlement. And there we integrate the land tenure security intervention with mental health and psychosocial support through a local partner, as well as agricultural and livelihoods development. So some key achievements also and impact to date from those interventions. We see as well an improved land tenure security for host communities and refugees, so both through the CCO registration and the land tenancy agreements, and an improved capacity also for land administration, the different institutions for which we are doing capacity strengthening activities. You see some numbers mentioned here on the slide. I will not read them all, but they reflect the impacts I just mentioned. Then let's move on to some lessons learned and some challenges we have encountered and are still encountering as well in our work. First of all, the complexity of land conflicts related to repatriation of returning refugees in Burundi in particular. Some of them date back to the 1972 crisis, and different government regimes have had different policies on how to deal with these conflicts, and this is creating difficulty for local committees, conflict resolution committees, to resolve those conflicts, and it remains a challenge. Another type of conflict that I haven't mentioned yet is related to state land, which has been identified at the start of our intervention. And some of the communities we work in have been identified as being living and working the land on, which is now identified as state land because they are natural reserves, so in protection zones. So that is also a challenge of how to both secure land tenure securities for those communities, as well as protecting the environment. For the Ugandan case, also there is conflicts related to the land on which refugees are settled long-term or even permanently. So this is a multi-layered type of conflict over land. So there's the open question of compensation for permanently settled or refugee settlements on the land, which exceeds the scope of local conflict mediation committees and of our intervention at the moment as well. Then we have also the distance for some refugees, as ratios and support for refugees in settlements have gone down considerably. They are looking for land to cultivate themselves, but for some of the settlements, the distance to reach host community land and then use it with a land tenancy agreement is quite far. It's another challenge we encountered. And lastly, another challenge is the rotation of staff within municipal land offices or district land boards is quite high. And it's a challenge because we strengthen their capacities, but then there's a new group coming in, and it's hard sometimes to keep the capacities that are built within the institution. Also, changes in administrative system at the moment going on in Burundi is a challenge to adapt our support towards that. Some lessons learned then. So access to land services for host communities, this is the Ugandan case, increases the acceptance of other land users. So once we support the host community to secure their land with the CCO, they are also more open to receive refugees to use their land using the land tenancy agreement. Also, secured land rights and land lease set incentives for efficient land use. So here we also see that both type of activities that we do in Uganda are working together towards a better and more sustainable use of the land. It incentivizes both host community and refugees. And support for improved sustainable land use management contributes to the perception of land tenure security. This was an interesting finding from a midterm evaluation we did in Burundi, that people were sharing that the intervention helping and supporting them in securing their land against erosion, for example, and applying climate smart agricultural techniques, for them, it's a form of land tenure security as well. And I just want to highlight the importance of integrated approaches, with conflict resolution being part of it, inclusive land tenure registration, capacity strengthening of the key actors, as well as support for the sustainable land use and land management of the land. Then lastly, we can move to some recommendation, some linked to those challenges and lessons learned I just mentioned. The complexity of land conflicts, this remains a challenge, but what we have done so far and what we ask for other actors also to continue to do is more campaigns of conflict resolution with public mediation sessions in the communities. We've seen some progress on that, even though not all of the conflicts are able to be resolved on this local level. And related to conflicts on state land with regards to the natural reserves and the protection zones, we want to extend and ask also the other actors to extend advocacy and think of innovative solutions that promote both the community land tenure security, so that they won't lose their land or have to be chased off their land basically because of this, but at the same time also combine it with actions that will protect the environment and use the community for that purpose as well. From the activities that we do in the transit centers, the awareness raising, information sharing, we get a lot of requests, questions afterwards as well. So we need to strengthen post-awareness raising monitoring by setting up a more structured mechanism to gather feedback and adjust interventions accordingly, because at the moment we are not supporting this same systematic land tenure registration in the areas, in all the areas in Burundi. So if there's more actors also who can join this, that would be great. As well as the need for more funding to indeed extend this type of work in Burundi, because a lot of land still is unregistered, creating more and more conflicts when there's more and more repatriation as well. Thirdly, improving access to justice for the most vulnerable. Some conflicts are not being solved at the local level, and for vulnerable groups, it's hard to go to court. So if there is possibility to link up or refer to other actors who provide legal assistance, that would be a step forward, and that's recommended. And lastly, specifically on the refugee context, so more the Ugandan context, it would be good to have some more research on this land tenancy agreement, land use for refugees being more protected, land use of host community members. But what is the effect of that on their perspectives of return? Does it change anything in their perspective of return? It would be interesting to have more research on that. Thank you very much. This is this from our side, and we are looking forward if there's any inputs or questions on what we've shared. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Clara and Alexandra, for a very comprehensive presentation. I think it was good to really hear what can be done at the community level as the government sets up the mechanism that allows for these land rights tenure to happen. I also took note of the very comprehensive integrated support that has been provided, which it's not just a land right issue, but there is all the other issues that are surrounding it that makes this much more sustainable. I've also taken note of the need to do a bit more research, I think, which is very much an interesting area. And yeah, and I actually one point that really struck me was the fact that you mentioned that by formalizing some of these land use agreements, it actually has led to encouraging more host communities, this was the Uganda case, to allow for access to land for refugees. So I think these are very positive findings that we're finding as together with the challenges, of course, of a very daunting challenge of the scale of the issue that we are dealing with. So huge thank you on that. And with that, I'm going to pass the floor to the last presenter on the progress from the Permanent Mission of Armenia, Ms. Khrachuhi Katvalarian. And I'm really sorry, I probably have not pronounced your name correctly, but we will like to hear from you also on the Armenia experience. So over to you.
Thank you very much, dear Sakura. We would like to thank UNHCR for inviting us to this today's meeting, and we would like also to thank all previous speakers. Armenia is among the countries hosting the largest number of refugees per capita, which is a huge burden for a small country that has faced at least 4 major refugee crises since its independence. We value UNHCR's prompt response in providing international protection to refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia's Deputy Prime Minister's Office, as coordinator of the refugee response together with United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, working closely with Resident Coordinator Office, coordinated the response efforts under the Refugee Coordination Forum, mobilizing over 60 partners around the interagency refugee response plan, including first responders, civil society organizations, international and local non-governmental organizations, development community, and the UN, following a joint appeal by the government of Armenia and UNHCR. Approximately 52 million US dollars were received. The long-term priority for all refugees is now to ensure their inclusion in and contribution to Armenia's social, cultural, and economic development, with full enjoyment of their social, economic rights, implementation of social housing and employment programs. The government of Armenia has undertaken a number of important pledges at the GRF and has made a significant progress in fulfilling them. One of the major successes has been amending the national citizenship laws, which led to 50% reduction in statelessness. Armenia has been an early and active participant in the GRF process. It has submitted a total of 13 pledges across 2 forums. 6 pledges during the GRF 19 focused on statelessness reduction, legal reforms, asylum system enhancement, and refugee integration, and 7 pledges at GRF 2023 responding to the displacement of ethnic Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh and emphasizing inclusion in national systems, documentation, and gender-sensitive protection. These pledges reflect Armenia's broader shift from emergency response to inclusive, system-based approaches. As of June 2025, 5 pledges are fulfilled and 7 are in active implementation. 1 remains pending. In this regard, I would like to highlight the productive cooperation with the Yerevan office in UNHCR. A number of important documents prepared by the office recently helped the government formulate further priorities in terms of assistance to refugees, shifting the focus from emergency response to long-term needs, and bridging the gaps between humanitarian needs and development on integration of refugees. Particularly the documents on lessons learned exercise on refugee response and coordination, and operationalizing the humanitarian development nexus in Armenia, as well as inclusive livelihoods national framework for refugees and host communities have been prepared, which outline the perspectives of integration of host communities into the specific response, balancing accountability considerations, ensuring social cohesion. These documents prioritize the housing issues, creating employment opportunities, assessing the potential of refugees, applying different approaches to the urban and rural population, including creating conditions for rural and agricultural development. Particularly, the Inclusive Livelihoods National Framework for Refugees and Host Communities focuses its attention on the following 5 main priorities: direct cash assistance and co-financing, which represents support for vulnerable groups; social housing programs, which offer the renovation of 7 public buildings for 1,400 beneficiaries; employment programs, which offer vocational training; small businesses and self-employment, which provide support for refugee business activities; and livelihood support for vulnerable groups, which provides monetary, psychological, social support, as well as training to women, elderly people with health problems, and the disabled. In addition, in order to transition from urgent support to achieving socio-economic stability, including ensuring proper housing conditions for displaced population, the government of Armenia has initiated and is implementing the following measures. Accommodation and utility cost compensation program was initially designed to provide 6 months compensation of 40,000 Armenian drams for accommodation and 10,000 Armenian drams for utilities via bank transfer per displaced individuals for the period from October to March. Furthermore, on May 16, 2024, the government approved state support program for housing for families forcibly displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as the procedure for implementation of program on June 14, 2024. The main objective of the programs is to ensure social and economic inclusion of persons forcibly displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh by creating the conditions necessary for their long-term residence in the Republic of Armenia. The program is implemented in any one of the following methods for support. First, issuance of certificate for purchasing an apartment or a private residential house. Second, issuance of a certificate for constructing a private residential house. And the third, issuance of a certificate of support for repayment of an existing mortgage loan. The support amount for purchasing or building a house will range from 3 to 5 million Armenian drams in housing certificates per person, depending on the location of the apartment or house. These certificates will enable families to secure a mortgage loan, with the state making payments equivalent to the value of the certificate. The housing assistance provided by the state with the fully non-repayable. Given that the housing program will be implemented in phases, the government will continue to assist forcibly displaced populations with rental costs. Starting from early 2025, the current accommodation and utilities program will be refined to be more targeted and needs-based, ensuring that the support provided does not discourage the economic activation of beneficiaries. To ensure continuity of operations, we stress the importance of enhancing the operational and financial capacity of the UNHCR Armenia office, which will be important also for addressing challenges such as to involve donors in implementing livelihood program, particularly to provide the forcibly displaced refugees with affordable houses. An initial priority is 480 high vulnerability refugees lacking private shelter. Further capacity would be shared with other at-risk families. Renovation costs of 6.84 billion Armenian drams remain partially funded, with 525 million Armenian drams secured so far. These repurposed units will provide safe, low-cost rentals and integrate social services, aligning with international best practices in post-crisis housing support. Collectively, the 5 pillars of the livelihood program require over 103.1 billion Armenian drams, and which is equal to 262 million US dollars during the next 2 to 3 years. While initial government allocations exist, particularly for training programs and partial housing renovations, multi-year donor co-financing is essential. Timely and adequate funding will enable a seamless transition from humanitarian aid to sustainable development-led solutions. By aligning refugee support with Armenia's national priorities, this framework ensures that both host communities and displaced populations gain from expanded economic opportunities, strengthened social cohesion, and greater resilience to future challenges. The ongoing assistance for the forcibly displaced population of Nagorno-Karabakh remains crucial, and we are optimistic that strong involvement from our partners will make a difference. Additionally, sustained support programs in the medium and long term will necessitate substantial financial resources. Initial estimates suggest that addressing the housing needs of refugees alone would entail a budget of over $1.5 billion. Finally, before closing, I would like to reiterate our commitment to ensuring that the durable solutions for refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh address their housing needs. Meantime, we will appreciate the support of our partners in joining efforts for translating the pledges into tangible actions and progress on the ground to live up to the promise we owe to every displaced person. I thank you.
Thank you very much for a comprehensive update from the progress that has been achieved by Armenia in supporting the refugees in Armenia. Very well. I was listening with very much interest the livelihood projects and the whole comprehensive perspective that is being taken, including social housing, in providing support, focusing on social cohesion, as well as the various support mechanisms that the government is putting in place. So thank you very much for that. And that actually concludes the presentation of the various progresses that we had on the program from a very diverse actors, a diverse perspective, from all the way from the member states, from the government perspective to a very local perspective. And we have also heard earlier, even in our keynote speeches, some of the good practices that has already been happening in the countries. I'm going to take the floor again to apologize for starting the meeting approximately 10 minutes late because of the technical issues. And I'm begging actually your kind indulgence to continue 10 minutes extra, if that is agreeable, because I would like to make sure that we also open the floor to any comments, interventions, and feedback on the very rich presentation that we have heard so far. I do have one hand already noted, which is from a UNDP colleague, Ms. Lara Deramix. So she will have the floor, but in the interim, I'm also encouraging others to either raise their hands or put your questions in the chat as we listen, because even if we do not manage to get around to some of the comments that you may have, we would still like to capture this as part of the report. So with that, I'm handing the floor over to Lara. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we do hear you. We don't see you, but we hear you.
We don't see me?
Yes, now we see you.
I
Perfect.
see myself, so that's very odd.
That's great.
You see me now? Yes, so apologies, Sakura. I was actually invited to present on behalf of UNDP on the pledges. So I was expecting to be part of the presenters, but I see that we are running out of time. So is that okay if I present on behalf of UNDP now? I'll try to keep it at about 5 minutes.
Yeah, that would be super.
Thank you so much. So thank you all for the presentations. My name is Lara Dorame. I'm a justice specialist in UNDP's Rule of Law, Justice and Security team in the Crisis Bureau in New York. And I really appreciate the opportunity to make this short presentation. So the work that I would like to present feeds into UNDP's institutional pledge. I'm not going to go in details into it, but the idea is really to leverage the country presence and the development expertise of UNDP to strengthen the national and local capacities to promote increased access for development financing and to address the drivers of forced displacement, expanding work in peace building, including conflict, violence, and aggravating effects of climate change. So we have a focus on service delivery and including access to justice. So there's another pledge. We joined the Legal Community Pledge, a multi-stakeholder pledge that some of you might be familiar with, around the shared goal of working with refugees to advance their rights, justice and lasting solutions. And we made a specific pledge as UNDP to work with HCR and other UN entities and partners to support national actors, in this case, institutional rule of law actors, but also legal aid providers, CSOs, refugee-led organizations to improve the availability and quality of legal assistance in all matters, so as to advance people-centered justice for refugees, forcibly displaced, and host communities. And this pledge builds on our continued engagement in this space and a long-term partnership that we have with HCR in the area of rule of law to improve joint responses and along the principles of leaving no one behind, ensure that the forcibly displaced have equal access to institutions, services, and legal protection. So UNDP has worked on housing, land, and property rights in a series of contexts to protect the rights of the displaced due to conflict or disasters. And today I'm going to shortly present ongoing work in Syria and Myanmar, two contexts where UNDP was already engaged in protecting HLP rights and stepped up its engagements in the aftermath of the earthquakes that took place in 2023 and 2025, respectively. So in Syria, UNDP is working in partnership with UN Habitat, UNHCR, and others in a housing, land, and property joint program that has included, among other, joint advocacy, research, and analysis on HLP, establishment of a library of translated laws, development of HLP due diligence and guidance, the training of local entities, administrative units, and syndicates, as well as lawyers and law students, We have also developed, in partnership with NRC, a collaborative dispute resolution mechanism based on local customs that has supported HLP rights, and the establishment of citizen service centers and referral desks to increase access to HLP and civil documentation. So the existing partnerships were instrumental in applying joint approaches when the earthquake hit in 2023. It helped for targeted assessments in HLP, development of guidance contextualizing HLP in the earthquake response in line with international standards, development of guides for the recovery workers, and most importantly, ensuring that HLP issues are included in the overall response to the earthquake. So it also allowed to quickly deploy trained lawyers that were already trained in HLP rights with the Bar Association via mobile legal aid clinics, first in the shelters, but then also establish help desks and legal clinics to support the proof of ownership and documentation needs in partnership with local administrations. As a result, there was also a lot of legal awareness done, and legal counseling in person and online. This joint work with all these partners allowed to train more than 2,000 people at community level and more than 4,000 legal professionals. More than 4,000 people had access to legal counseling, and more than 8,000 via the online legal counseling platform, and that includes Syrians abroad, many of whom have experienced multiple displacements. And more than 20,000 people benefited from the citizen service centers that were established. If I have time, quickly just to mention that in Myanmar, because of the situation of institutional capture and paralysis, UNDP has been supporting civil society organizations program of adaptive legal aid responses for interim protection of HLP rights. That involves only indirect last resort work with institutions. So that involves specific work methodologies to reduce and mitigate the risks for CSOs working in that space, and a strong focus on legally empowering the communities, developing preventive measures to protect people from land grabbing, including with the use of digital mapping, promote recognition of customary tenure, preemptively identify potential sources of conflict, and try and solve as much as possible disputes through mediation, facilitated negotiation, and collaborative dispute resolution mechanisms. The work in Myanmar also including doing research to try and develop the future models to address these very complex issues in a country where the legal frameworks are also very discriminatory to a series of minorities like the Rohingya and Muslims. So in the aftermath of the earthquake, UNDP has focused on promoting HLP due diligence in the early recovery response, navigating between the de facto authorities, supported legal awareness, legal counseling, and legal aid to mitigate the administrative violence, the legal coercive methods, the abuse of authority and corruption that was linked to the earthquake. Give you an example that earthquake victims asking to pay unreasonable fees or bribes to obtain their demolition permits or reconstruction permits, for example. So very challenging to navigate the administration, and the program with the CSOs was meant to accompany people to navigate those difficult processes. So these adaptive legal aid strategies are adopted to support individuals obtain reissuance of citizenship cards, household certificates, HLP documentation, permits to repair or reconstruct, and also support in formalizing transfers of property and seeking remedies. All of that with a dedicated attention to women, elders, people with disability among the most critically impacted by the earthquake. I'll keep it there. I just wanted to add some recommendations. We see that those crises underscore the need for disaster responsive land governance system that protect rights and ensure equitable access to housing and support resilient recovery. And these challenges are compounded when they occur in contexts of conflict, existing displacement, structural barriers to justice, and weak land and property records. So what we would like to recommend is perhaps more efforts into preparedness. For example, addressing the legal framework gaps. Sometimes there's no law, no operational framework for disaster response. That's one of the lessons learned. Also, preemptive capacity enhancement of national and local entities, advance as much as possible the digital transformation of cadastral records and legal identity documents, but also targeted awareness campaigns on rights and risks related to climate and natural disasters. The importance, of course, to work both with the displaced and host communities was mentioned by some colleagues. The importance to work at community level and empower civil society organizations. What we see is that sometimes they are the best placed in the communities, that's especially the case in Myanmar, to understand the communities, but they often lack the capacities and the funds to operate. And that is something that we should look into, really strengthening the capacities of local CSOs. So other include the importance of mainstreaming HLP rights into all the recovery and response work, especially after disasters, and to look at HLP vulnerabilities comprehensively, conflict, climate, and natural disasters. So we join other colleagues as well in the importance of data and research. I'll keep it there. Thank you so much for giving me the space.
Thank you very much, Lara, and my apologies for a bit of the confusion, but thank you very much for speaking from the floor, but giving us a very comprehensive presentation and an update on where UNDP stands with their pledge and the work that is ongoing. And I think there's a lot to, again, learn from a lot of the experience that we heard today from Syria, also from the unique situation in Myanmar. I think all the presentation that was given today was extremely rich. I have not seen any other hands up in the chat, but there is also been some questions put in the chat that has been responded to, and so please do keep the questions coming if you do have questions in the chat. But otherwise, I just want to take the opportunity to thank all the presenters and all the colleagues who participated today for a very, very, very rich discussion that we had. It's an area, HLP is an area where you may not see immediate impact, but it's something that is extremely important. And I think we also heard from Lara right now how this is not just a thing that just happens, but rather it's a whole continuum from emergency to recovery, and again an emergency in some situations. But it's a thread that goes through all the way through from humanitarian emergencies to development, and an extremely important component when we look at HLP rights, especially from the refugee reintegration in the country of origin, but also in social inclusion and self-reliance in host countries as well. And I think we have also heard from the multiple presentation today that how important securing tenure is to conflict recovery, peace building, socioeconomic development. We've heard the link again and again between the humanitarian development and peace nexus throughout the presentation, and also how complicated the land conflict and the the solutions that we could have are in relation to the sensitivities that it brings. So a lot of good recommendations, a lot of forward-looking ideas, as well as also a lot of work that is still ongoing that we can all contribute to. And again, one of the things that was very heartening to hear was the fact that there's a lot of integrated approach that are being taken on HLP issues, addressing different spectrum of the challenges, which is not just related to land tenure or housing lands and property rights, but also the circumstances and the communities that surround it. So just as a last big thank you to everyone. As said at the very beginning, this was one of the stock takes that we have done in preparation for the HLOM that is upcoming this year. We will be again reaching out individually to various colleagues to also hear from you the various updates that you have in relation to the pledge and its implementation, as well as also try to capture the very rich discussion and the presentation that we had today. So with that, and with my last apologies once again for the technical issues at the start, but thank you very much for a very active participation to the stock taking exercise. Thank you and have a good evening or good morning to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sakura. Thank you,
Sakura,
everyone.
thank you very much.
Bye-bye.